Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is another fantastic adventure, mini-series from the incredible mind of Borb-Beach, aka Tales from the Cryptid. As ever, please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid Crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story. Entitled, If you see a man with a red notepad, you need to read this as a matter of life and death. Let's get straight into that. I don't know his name. I don't know his age. I don't know where he lives, and I certainly don't know how to find him. All that I know is that he's dangerous, and he's on the move. I'm a government employee. I work in a research lab that develops experimental weaponry, primarily of the biological variety. I don't want to say much more than that, as this is already a massive risk of exposing my identity. But I will say that I'm not exactly an intern. I've seen things, I've studied things, I've created things. I created him, or better put, I recreated him. I'm confused. I don't blame you. If you're reading this, then you're well aware of the concept of legends and mythology, things that feed on our collective imaginations to grow more powerful, that live on our tongues as we utter their names and speak their stories, growing and evolving until they become a force of their own, unstoppable, unforgettable. The man with a red notepad is one of them. I'm not positive, but I think his legend began in an email chain from the late 90s. You know the type. Forward this to 20 people in the next hour, or some arsehole is going to hack you to pieces with an axe. Except his went a little differently. In his, he would find his victims and draw them. And sometimes he would draw them drowning to death. Other times he would draw them wasting away in a hospital bed. And other times he would draw them being cut open and pulled apart. It was a coin toss what version of the internet myth that you'd encounter, but all of them had one thing in common. He would draw you, and you would die. The thing about the man, though, was that his sketches were thorough. It wasn't enough to simply make a stick figure labelled Sally and have that stick figure being impaled by a flagpole. No, in his sketches, Sally was a detailed work of art, with immaculate shading and perfect lines. There were exceptions to the rule, of course. Wrinkles, makeup, long hair, short hair, things that would naturally change over the course of a lifetime. These never needed to be exact, as long as the core of the individual was on display. His nightmare worked as magic. As such, his sketches would take hours. Sometimes they would take days. It was only after he had finished his sketches and signed them with his messy initials that a death sentence would be triggered. When I received the assignment, I laughed. Give life to a legend? I remember saying to my boss. You know April Fool's was 6 months ago, right? She wasn't laughing though. I remember the steeple of her fingers, the nervous twitch at the corner of her mouth, and the smell of cheap coffee gently steaming on the table between us. Fear, she said carefully, is a weapon more powerful than bullets and bombs. We need that right now. That was 6 years ago. I have grown since then, mentally and physically. And so has the man. He started life in a test tube, shapeless and helpless. Before long though, he was walking, talking, and after not much longer than that, he was killing. At first it was prisoners, people we'd pulled from the black sites. We'd sit both of them in a lab we called the Red Room, the prisoner chained and the man behind a plexiglass divider. He'd draw them, and they would die. Sometimes they'd catch fire. Other times, they'd break out in hives, scratch their own skin bloody and flay themselves alive. Although, they would die. Needless to say, we didn't permit him his notepad when the experiments weren't running. In the time between, he'd sit alone in his small cell, hunched over in a corner and with his head down. I suppose I couldn't blame him. With only a thin mattress, a bowl of shit and piss, and 2 meals a day there, wasn't much else for him to do. We kept 2 cameras pointed at him at the front of the room, just in case, monitoring the man at all times. We even made sure to cycle the guards, on and off chance he managed to coax one into becoming sympathetic. Hell, thanks to some clever genetic work on part of my science team, he rarely even needed showers, and so he was virtually always under lock and key. We took steps, is what I'm saying. We covered our bases. Despite it though, he escaped. I got a call last week, and when my boss broke the news, at first, I called bullshit. It was impossible. Nobody escaped the facility. Hell, I remember the day it first opened, when I was still a young woman, with stars and stripes in my eyes and fantasies of helping my country defeat the bad guys. I remember the contractor who overseeing the construction, a round and hairy man with breath like garlic sausage and the fingers to match. He called the facility state of the art, proudly boasting that Sherlock fucking Holmes couldn't break out of here. And yet, the man was gone. Not only was he gone, but he had left a bloodbath in his wake. All in all, there were over 10 security personnel dead. One of the guards was found outside the man's cell, her skull cracked open, brain matter gently oozing from the fracture. Another was found in the camera control room, a bottle of Drano at his side and vomit covering his chest. Another was a personal friend of mine and head of the overnight guard detail. He was found draped over the woman who ran the front desk. A bullet in both of their brains. It was horrifying and mystifying all at once. How could this have happened? The man's cell was entirely enclosed and didn't allow him to see any of our personnel. The most it had was a tiny slot on the bottom that we passed food through, and he passed his shit and piss through. Each week when we'd retrieve him for our experiments, we'd even dispatch personnel to scrub the room and ensure he wasn't drawing on any of the surfaces. Of course, we tried consulting the camera footage, but the cameras had been disabled during his escape. There was nothing. He was just gone. A few hours after the escape, I got a call from the IT department. They'd been going back through the old footage of the man, trying to determine if there was some hint of what was to come. Something that might indicate exactly what had happened. They showed me footage of the man in his cell, and it looked like the same routine I'd seen 1,000 times before. He sat in the far corner and with his head down, silently waiting for his next meal or bowel movement. There was the sound of the latch opening, followed by a woman's voice calling to the man for supper. And then a covered plate of food slid across the floor, when the man shifted, getting up to retrieve the plate, and when he did, I saw it. A tapestry of red was written upon his flesh, detailed in intricate markings covering his stomach that looked like they had been carved by the edge of a fingernail. He quickly readjusted his shirt, taking care to tuck it back into his waistband. My jaw dropped in stunned silence. "Can you play back the footage with his shirt up?" I said quietly. "But take a still capture and zoom in." The IT technician nodded and did so. That's when it all came together. The markings in the man's flesh were his escape plan, his sketches, each one an immaculate carving of the facility's guards, each one a piece of the puzzle. One showed a guard unlocking a man's cell, then caving in her own skull with a heavy steel door. Another had a guard disabling the cameras and then swallowing drain cleaner. The last sketch was of a man I knew, the head of the nighttime guard detail. I pictured him shooting and killing 7 other security personnel, and then turning his sidearm on himself. There was also another sketch. I recognized that face as well. My heart sank momentarily before realizing the subject of the sketch was still alive. She was the secretary in our archives, a young woman who had tragically lost her arm in a traffic collision 2 months ago. She hadn't been back to work yet, but it pictured her burning down the archives and all the local research we had on the man before walking into the flames herself. She still had 2 arms. My mind turned, and I realized how the man had pulled it all off. It was in the time between experiments. It was during the walks we'd take to the Red Room. And while he made his way along the corridors in chains, he'd catalogue faces, features. He'd stored them away in his memory, taking care to notice small details of their schedules. He'd grown up here, after all, spent years in the facility. He had plenty of time to grow familiar. At first, my boss refused to believe it. She argued that he never indicated any such capability in the email chains we'd pulled from his legend, and that he'd always needed his red notepad. And once he had it, he needed his subjects present to sketch them. It was, of course, a mistake to forget that legends evolve. Now, that mistake has cost people their lives. I see it in the news reports. They're easy to miss if you don't know what you're looking for, but I know that man is on the move, and he's killing again. The facility and the government refused to comment on it. They refused to come clean about the things we were doing and the danger to the public. My boss died 2 days ago. The day before that, a member of my research team passed away, and the day before that, 2 other members died. I'd probably be dead myself if I hadn't seen the writing on the wall and taken one of my own fingers off. So now, I'm taking matters into my own hands. I'm raising the alarm to you, the public. The man with the red notepad, well, he's out there. He may be sketching you. You might not even see him doing it. Or maybe he'll say hello to you in passing. Maybe he'll just take a memory. But if you do catch somebody looking at you a little too carefully, or glancing your way before putting pen to paper, then it's time to run. It's time to run and maybe leave a finger behind for good measure. Part 2. If you see a woman with a serrated smile, you need to read this as a matter of life and death. Let's get straight into that. I'm a government employee. My name isn't important. All you need to worry about is what I have to say. I work at a compound known as the facility. Within it, we perform research on things the public would find unappetizing. Officially, we're listed on experimental weapons development, but lately, our umbrella has spread much wider. Suffice to say that there are things out there that go bump in the night, things both legendary and mundane that exert their influence upon us and defy explanation. My job is to interview the individuals who believe they encountered such entities and determine the validity of their experiences. This is one such interview. The room is cramped, dimly lit, and smells vaguely of stout piss and black mold. A light hangs above the table between us, rocking back and forth and doing a poor job illuminating much of anything. Still, I can see the man's face and the fields on my clipboard. It's enough. It will do. I asked the man to tell me his story, and it begins. It happened when I visited her cabin, the man says. He's 29, with a long nose and a 5 o'clock shadow. When he reaches for a cigarette, his hands shake. Not my cabin. It belonged to her, but she invited the three of us up. To get away from it all, I make note of my clipboard. 4 individuals. He nods, taking a heavy drag on the smoke. Yeah, something like that. Get drunk, get stoned, forget life for a while. He swallows and his eyes dart to the cameras in the corners of the room. He scratches his cheek anxiously. It's a look I've seen before. It's better if you tell me everything, I say, placing my clipboard on the desk between us. Strictly speaking, I'm not law enforcement. I'm not here to have you arrested. Sure, he says. Another long drag. He taps a finger on the desk. Tap, tap, tap. We were doing mushrooms too. At least Stephen and I were. That's fine. I check a box on my clipboard labeled intoxicated. Tell me about the event. It happened late last night. The 4 of us had been drinking in the cabin, but we slept outside in tents. You know, less spiders to deal with. The cabin wasn't exactly lived in year-round, so a lot of bugs would make their homes in it over the winter and spring. Just to confirm, you used mushrooms while drinking? I steady my pencil on the form. On the box beside intoxicated, it reads disqualified. That's a combination, inviting hallucinations. Look, it wasn't a hallucination, alright? The man seethes for a moment, clenches his hand into a fist while his lips make a thin line. Then he takes a deep breath and regains his composure. I'm sorry, he says. Thinking about that night puts me on edge. Understandable, I say. Such reactions are to be expected after witnessing an event. Now then, if you wouldn't mind clarifying my earlier question. Did you consume mushrooms while drinking? He shakes his head. No, the mushrooms happened several hours earlier. They weren't even a factor when. He trouts off, his eyes glazing at the ashtray on the table between us. There's an emptiness to them, a sort of disconnect. I wonder if he's thinking of the legend I suspect that he's encountered. I wonder if he's thinking of Jagged Janice. I clear my throat. They weren't a factor when the event occurred? Yeah, they'd worn off by then. You're positive? He gives me a look of disbelief. No, I'm fucking lying to you for the fun of it. Yes, I'm positive. Aggressive behavior, I remind him, will not be tolerated. He opens his mouth and words hang there for a moment. I've done enough of these interviews to know that there's more he wants to say, or maybe yell. He doesn't though. Instead, he takes another breath, leans back in his chair, and apologizes. Look, he says. I know what I'm gonna tell you is gonna make me sound crazy, or high, or whatever the fuck else. I promise you though, it happened. And seeing as you're the one who came to me for this interview, the least you can do is listen. I nod. Of course, entirely reasonable. I circle the word irate on my form. He opens his mouth and words hang there for a moment. What are you writing? The man asks, leaning forward. He narrows his eyes at my clipboard as I pull it away. Why won't you show me? It's against protocol. Your knowledge of my notes could influence your account. I'd prefer it if such biases were avoided. Now please, continue. He licks his lips. They're chapped and cracked. Fine, he says. Like I said, we were drinking in the cabin, swapping old stories from high school, talking about stupid pranks we used to pull, or places we'd all hang out, or shitty teachers we hated. You know, we reminisced. His fingers tapped the table. Tap, tap, tap. Pretty soon we were getting really drunk. The sort of drunk way you stop goofing off and things go deeper. We start talking about our hopes and dreams, and about our pasts and futures. You know, the kind of shit that sets your soul on fire. Well, that's very poetic, I say. Are you a writer? Sometimes. As such, would you describe yourself as having an active imagination? He sighs and shakes his head. I describe myself as in the middle of speaking, thanks. I press my pencil to the clipboard. Undetermined. So, we're all drinking, he continues. And Emily gets really low all of a sudden, like mood-wise. She seems down. Emily being the woman who inherited the cabin? He nods. We ask her, what's up? Not to be pushy or anything, but just like, as friends, you know? I mean, fuck. We've known each other for over 10 years at this point. We care about each other. What does she tell you? He looks down and there's a melancholy in his expression. She tells us why she never invited us out there before. I scratch a note on the form, straightening up in my chair. That reason being, her brother died there when they were kids. He drowned to death in the ocean. I frown. It doesn't match the legend. Anything else? He glares at me. Are you serious? Anything else? Yeah, that's it, asshole. Her brother died. And the place, it reminds her of him. A sad story, but not why we're here. I check a box labeled confrontational. Please, continue. He takes a few minutes to think about it. His jaw is clenched, and his eyes are boring into me. Eventually, he takes another drag, breathes out a plume of smoke and speaks. Like I said, we're drinking, talking, but like all good things, it comes to an end. Emily stops first. She decides she's ready to head to bed. That she's had enough to drink, so she heads back to her tent. And that leaves me, Stephen, and Haley. Haley's passed out on the couch and Stephen and I chat for another couple of hours. But eventually, we both decide it's time to get some shut-eye too. I nod. So far, nothing mentioned warrants the facility's involvement, but I'm keeping an open mind. The police report sounded like Janice, after all. According to the police report, I say, rolling my pencil in my fingers. The cabin is where the event occurred. Can you describe it to me? Can you describe it for me? The layout. Sure. He scratches the back of his head and furrows his brow. His pupils dilate in focus, as though recalling a memory. It's sort of T-shaped, capital T. It's got 2 bedrooms on either side of the T, with a bathroom at the top center. There's even a living area in front of the bathroom. And finally, at the bottom of the T is the kitchen and the front door. You said the event occurred in the washroom, correct? He takes another drag on his cigarette, burning it down to the filter. His eyes are bloodshot. You got any more of these? He asks. I reach inside my jacket and pull out a pack, and then toss it to him. He eagerly flips it open, slips a smoke out and lights it. So, the 4 of you get into your tents. What happens next? He shrugs. I read my book. Your book? Yeah, Mistborn. Ever read it? I shake my head. I don't care for fantasy. What happens after you read the book? Nature calls. Gotta take a shit, so I get up and head to the cabin. It's pitch dark outside when I unzip my tent. I can't even see my feet on the ground. Pitch dark? Or had your eyes simply not yet adjusted? Pitch dark, he says flatly. The cabin's on a tiny island off the coast of British Columbia. The only light he gets is the moon, maybe the stars. That night it was overcast, so the moonlight came and went with the clouds. You carried a flashlight, then? He shakes his head. No, just my phone. I use this light to make my way to the cabin. Once I get inside, I shut the door behind me. And I get a weird feeling. Can you describe the feeling? Like I'm being watched. Promising. Continue. The place feels empty, lonely. It's just me, the spiders, and my phone. He pauses. The light's making shadows out of everything. The dusty fridge, the messy shelves, and the cluttered counters. There are 1,000 shapes all around me, shifting as I walk, and this feeling of, I don't know. Dread comes over me, like I'm not safe. He clears his throat, but I'm drunk enough that the feeling doesn't do much to faze me. I shake it off. I laugh a little. I came to take a shit, and some spooky shadows aren't gonna stop me, right? I guess they call it liquid courage for a reason. He laughs at his own joke. A few seconds later, though, I'm in the bathroom and locking the door behind me. His legs bouncing under the table, and he's shaking the top of it. Would you like a glass of water? I ask, pouring him a cup. I recognize the anxious body language and the incessant licking of his lips. I've seen it before. He waves a hand dismissively. I'm all right, he says, but he reaches across and takes a sip anyway. So, I'm about to unbuckle and do my business. And I see movement. It's in the top corner of the bathroom, in one of those little toilet windows. Like the type that's clouded on the bottom for privacy, but clear on the top to let in light. I've seen those, I say, nodding. I have one in my bathroom. Is that where the event occurred? He nods, running a hand through his dark hair. That's where I saw the smile. Jagged Janice. Describe it, please. He shakes his head. I'd rather not. Can we just discuss the event? The smile is part of the event, I remind him. It's important that we get as many details as possible, no matter how uncomfortable those memories may be. He looks down and his eyes drift out of focus. He's remembering it, the smile. It was a row of teeth, except the teeth were too big and too sharp to belong to a human. I look down on my notes. I read over the description of Jagged Janice, as mentioned in old email chains from the early 2000s. I'd like to hear more about her teeth. He bites his lip. Her teeth? Why? The teeth, they're important. Describe them, please. He's uncomfortable. His voice cracks and his chest sighs, but he gives me what I want. The teeth were jagged, serrated almost. The length was all over the place. Some barely broke her gums. Others stretched down, piercing her bottom lip. His fingers move again. They tap it on the metal table. Tap, tap, tap. When I see the smile, my heart starts pounding. I'm frozen there, standing in a dark bathroom with just a light from my phone. My mind's reeling, but I know whoever that smile belongs to. I don't want them seeing me, and so I hold my phone to my chest and extinguish the light. Did the woman showcase an adverse reaction to the light? Janice, according to her legend, loathed light. No, or I don't know. Maybe. I can't remember small details. He's sweating now, his eyes transfixed on the cigarette burning low between his fingers. At that point, my body's mostly adrenaline. I feel a storm of it coursing through me and screaming at me to run or to fight this bitch or do something, anything. But I can't. I just stand there, staring at her inhuman teeth. At her horrible, twisted smile with my phone clutched to my chest like a Christian cross. Then the smile begins to fall away, lowering itself until the foggy part of the glass obscures it. In its place are two eyes. He takes a breath. They're wide, angled all wrong and leaking black fluid. They dart around the washroom as if looking for something or somebody. I stay still, paralyzed. There's no light, save the moon framing the monster in the window. And so I meld into the darkness, and I pray to fucking God the creature can't see me there. I feel dribbles of piss run down my leg. I'm panicking now, completely. I'm losing control of my body. He shivers, taking another long, slow drag on his cigarette. Then I hear the tapping on the window. Tap, tap, tap. It's followed by this chattering sound, and I realize it's her teeth gnashing together, open and shut, over and over again. I don't want to look at her, but part of me can't stop myself. I glance up to the window and I see her eyes staring back at me. These two tiny black dots in a sea of white. My breathing stops. My pulse, it races. It's just the two of us now, watching one another. I lean forward, interested. Most of that description could have been pulled from the Jagged Janice legend itself. The tiny black pupils, the rows of inhuman teeth, the gnashing jaws. I check off the features on my clipboard as I go. What happens next? I ask. Then she speaks. It's only 3 words, but it's enough to turn my dribble of piss into a torrent. He swallows, but his eyes wide as he recites the words.
I see you.
I write them down and circle the words 3 times. They're not familiar to me. Did she sound young or old? Describe her voice. He shakes his head, shuddering. The voice was quiet, hard to hear. The words sounded like they'd been pulled out of the wood chipper. Their pronunciation was broken, unnatural, like they'd been cut up by those teeth. Curious, I mutter. Continue. Her fingers reach up and she taps on the glass again. Tap, tap, tap. And I chance another look. And all I can see is that terrible, serrated smile. I look away, but now I need to watch her. I have to monitor her because who the fuck knows what this creature is gonna try. And so I look back up. But the smile's gone, and so is the woman. It's just me. He puts his face in his hands and his shoulders quake with silent sobs. A minute passes. It appears we've reached the end of his account. A harrowing experience, I say, giving my notes a final swipe with the pencil. I straighten up in my chair, flattening the front of my jacket, and reaching out to shake his hand. On behalf of the facility, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to share it with us. His sobs taper off. He's quiet for a moment, and then he looks up from his hands, and his eyes are red. His voice is shaking. "It's not over," he says. "There's more." I pull back, my handshake. "My apologies. Something else occurred." "Yes," he says. "The next few hours, they turned into a nightmare." Wow. Definitely another one. Wow. What an absolutely creepy, spine-chilling set of stories there from the incredibly talented Borb-Beach, or aka Tales from the Cryptid, over on Reddit No Sleep. That's the first two parts in this mini-series. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I. As ever though, please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help with the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid Crew. If you're an aspiring writer or would just like to have a crack at things, why not get in touch with myself at the usual email as on screen, which is dmtforesterfear@gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. Big thank you to the Cryptid Crew family. Got a great schedule lined up for you guys coming over the next few days, so keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. Of course, if you'd like to join the Cryptid Crew family and gain access to member-only content and early access videos, head to the homepage on the channel, and next to the subscribe button, there's a join button, or simply click the link in the description box below. I hope everybody's well and happy and trying to keep fit and focused as possible during these testing times. But above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.